everyone, how are we? It's Monday, isn't it? It's Monday, and the sun was shining a little bit today, which is slightly exciting as I watch from my kitchen in the distance, because it's one of those things going out and sitting with your laptop, isn't it? I just think it's going to explode at some point when it gets hot. Is it just me who thinks like that? Go outside with my Apple laptop, instantly think half an hour after that it's going to just break. But maybe it is just me. Also, I am wearing a top that says genius. It is ironic. We all know I'm not. I'm also with my wonderful wife mug. I'm one of those adults who isn't really a good adult. You'll probably be good adults. You'll probably have like matching crockery and cutlery. I have my dead grandma's cutlery mixed in with other cutlery that I've found, and I have various kind of mugs that are all themed over the years. If nothing, I'm thrifty. How are you all feeling? I did put on Twitter that I am still in my pyjama bottoms. Just thought I'd say that because I think that there are a lot of people out there who just seem to have their shit together. And I thought, well, if we're doing mental health, I may as well talk about the fact that I rarely do. And I'm very often at home wearing half pyjamas so that I look like I'm dressed from here up. But really from there down, I'm still in bed. How are we all feeling? Seeing a lot of stuff online at the moment about division still, a lot of anger. There's a lot of angry people around, aren't there? I always think that when you're an angry person, you need to think about it because your cortisol levels mean that your adrenaline and cortisol will all be flooding to regions such as your heart, which will kill you, or give you a big belly, because that's where cortisol fat exists. So the more stressed and angry you are, the worse it is for you. And that's one of the messages that we've got to get out there, haven't we, to all these angry trolls who are a special little breed of their own, aren't they? They're a special little breed of their own. They need their own little world where they can make very, very strong rules about things that they're very, very angry about, that they don't understand why they're angry, but they're just so angry, so they're going to do that. And we should just give them their own little parliament where they can go and be angry about everything there, whilst creating a lot of cortisol, which causes physical difficulties. Just saying. Come to me for advice if you're a troll. Right, let's get on with this. Sorry for my sarcasm. Sorry, my sarcasm, can't help it. I just can't help it. There are reasons why.
Sharon's asking what's up with your arm, just in case I think I'm beating you.
Why? What's wrong with my arm?
Got a bruise on the left.
That? Oh. Shall I tell you? Shall I tell you why? Because last week, often my children and me, like they'll be like, punch my arm, Mum. You know how boys do. I don't know what it is about young men, but they're always like, I'm so strong. I mean, my kids are pretty fit and strong. They work out a lot. One gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning and drives somewhere to do stuff and talks about benching. I'm exhausted. I have a workout thinking of their workout. Sometimes I have a workout thinking of their workout so much I need to lie down and have a glass of wine. That's how exhausting it is, guys. But they were doing that whole, Mum, punch me in the arm, and then they were laughing at me. They were laughing at me and they said I'm useless at punching and that I'm weak. So I said, I'm not weak, punch me in the arm. And then I instantly regretted it because it seems that I am really weak. And it's not very good to allow anybody to punch me in the arm, even as they said, when they were just having a little bit of a fun and giving me a soft dig. That's the result. I am highly anemic, and unfortunately, because the NHS is in the situation it's in, I have a blood condition, which means that I have to have transfusions and infusions, and I haven't been able to have my infusion for nearly 2 years because I'm due it once a year, and it fell into that time where it all went chaotic, and then I haven't been able to have it since. So I also bruise really easy at the moment because my anemia is very serious. So until I get brought in and pumped up, I'll bruise badly anyway. I'm also unbelievably clumsy. Like, if you could see my legs, imagine a 7-year-old after a busy day in a playground and a lot of falling over. That's my legs all the time. But there you go, a little bit of my medical history for you. But that's it, don't worry. Pete hasn't brought me this mug to appease after punching me. It was my kids, which kind of doesn't sound right when I say that. Pete's in the background going, He's got enough people online saying he's a wife beater. That's actually true. There's a whole group of people who say he's a wife beater. He'd be lucky to survive that, wouldn't he? Let's get on with this, guys. I have a binge eating disorder and I just can't get on top of it. I managed to stop a particular food that I was really bad with and would always go to, but I just can't get the strength to sort the rest of my eating out. And now I'm switching behaviour, not eating enough, then eating too much. I'm having counselling currently and have done on and off for the past 5 years. But the issue, I can track back to age 10 and I just can't shift it. Please help me, I'm 44 years old. Thank you so much. One of the things that happens with eating disorders, and I can completely relate to it because I've been very open about my own anorexia and bulimia from when I was younger, is I can track back also to the day where somebody called me Bonnie when I was 8 years old. And I thought that Bonnie meant fat. And that began the cycle for me of having a really poor relationship with body and food. But that wasn't the reason why I developed an eating disorder. And whatever happened to you at 10, it's not the reason it's sustained an eating disorder. And the problem is when we decide to allocate blame to a particular moment, and I know that certain therapists do and certain therapists believe that, and that's fine, but I'm going to tell you from my integrative experience of working with eating disorders for a very long time. My master's was on eating disorders. It's a big obsession for me because I always like to understand myself as well. I think we can ultimately get caught up in thinking to ourselves, like, this is what created it. But if you stop and take a step back and you think about the way that you eat as an expression of pain and also as an expression of habit, so it becomes this twofold issue. One, we get into a habit of reacting to any situation, whether that's fear, stress, loss, sadness, and we use food as the strategy and coping mechanism, either denial of or overeating. But then add to that the fact that it's an expression of pain. I can physicalize it. Very few of us in the Western-centric model, which I have a few problems with. I have more problems with it right now than I've ever had in my entire career because we are more unhappy than ever. And I don't get it when we just keep doing things that make people more unhappy. But hey, I don't know, maybe we could just change the way that we live, the system that it is. There are so many unhappy people and it's because we keep doing things that don't work for us. So when you think about it as an expression of pain, that's partly because we're brought up in a society where as much as we say we talk about mental health, often it's a very isolating feeling. Think about it. Last week, I felt really anxious. It doesn't matter how much my husband says, I'll sort this out, or we'll get this done, or don't you worry about that. There's a plan B and C. In that moment, it's like you are the most alone. It doesn't matter that you've got like 100 people who love you and care for you, or even if you've only got 1 or 2 people who love and care for you. The point is, it doesn't matter. It feels like you are wholly, individually responsible for managing that pain. And it's really scary. So with binge eating or with an eating disorder per se, let's just throw them all in there. Overeating, compulsive eating, bulimia eating, anorexic withholding, all of this, if we stop seeing it as food related, because we get lost in that way, and we start seeing it as an expression of pain, and then we realise that the reason that we're utilising that habit is because it's the one coping strategy that we formulated over a period of time that's consistently worked for us badly, but nonetheless worked for us. And actually then say to ourselves, oh, actually, right, this physicalisation of pain isn't working effectively. So yeah, it's a temporary fix. It does work temporarily. Stuff yourself full of food. That is going to answer that primal experience of feeling lonely, isn't it? It's going to fill it. And the area of your brain, the amygdala that gets full, is going to be like, nice one, sorted it. But then the shame and the guilt and the devastation and the self-hate and self-loathing, that's where the conscious brain comes in and says, I don't like this. Those feelings, that shame, that guilt, that's not teaching you to run away. That's not about saying, oh, you're a terrible human being. This should feel really awful. You deserve this. It's saying, I don't like the way this feels. This isn't working for me. I don't feel that what you just did with that behaviour has answered my need. Because it's a physical expression of pain, and what you need to do is you need to find the pain, and you need to learn to sit with the pain, and you need to soothe the pain, and you can only do that emotionally. You can do it relationally as well with the people you surround yourself with. You can do that strategic wise as well with certain elements that you bring into your world. It might be, for me, I will often, like last week when I was having one of those weeks, be like, these are emotional breakthroughs. These are spiritual epiphanies. These are moments of chaos that create growth. I'm not going to be able to run from it because it's going to find me. So you need to ask yourself, like, what is it that you're avoiding? What is it in those moments where you go and like binge and then withhold? What is it that's actually beneath it? What is the pain? Are you lonely? Are you angry? Do you feel like you're not being heard? What's going on in that situation? Because as soon as you can kind of answer that, that behavior and that strategy doesn't need to exist in the way it is doing. So arguably it's like, take a breath before you act on the behavior. Remember, as much as we want to believe that we're just compulsive creatures that have no control over our behavior, because that allows us to feel and feed into that behavior, doesn't it? If we say, well, I'm completely powerless, I'm a binge eater, there's nothing I can do, I'm just going to go and eat, or I'm going to withhold, then we become powerless and helpless. But we're the one making the choice. It's exactly the same with alcohol, don't get me wrong. Alcohol addiction and dependency, it's a disease, it's an illness. The person doesn't want to do it, but is so used to that cycle of coping that their body is connected to that experience. And of course they go and drink and then it perpetuates that cycle. But there's still a choice. We can choose not to do it, but it means we have to endure pain. And very few of us have got used to an idea that pain can be helpful. We're taught really early on that we should avoid it. If it feels bad, run. But that's not true. Everything emotionally has the same worth, whether it's great or whether it's terrible, because it's teaching you. So my thing would be, and certainly when I work with people with eating disorders, my master's was on autoethnographic research, which was the story of self, because it was also important to look at the self story so that I could listen to other people's stories and have them narrate their journeys. And actually very often when we have therapy, we're not always telling our story. We're often performing for the person. We're wanting to make breakthroughs, but not necessarily feeling that we have the right to express ourselves really freely. And sometimes you just need to tell that story. You need to sit there and be like, this is what happened when I was 10 years old. This is what happened when I was 12. Whatever it was, go through it all. But don't think that it's just about one event. It's about an expression of pain, and then further, every experience that causes pain is a further expression of that. And the thing about food is it's just you fail safe, but it's failed. It's not safe. So now it's about sitting with the pain, enduring it, and taking a different strategy. And that might be doing things like I would do, journal. I write, because when I write, there's a catharsis. It might be meditation. It might be forcing my brother to come and exercise with me so that I get off my arse, which is what he did today, because you have to create these strategies. I often think with eating disorders, we feel this level of shame because we think that we're meant to know how to cope. No one teaches you how to cope. There is not one human being in this world who goes through primary school and secondary school where somebody's going, this is how to cope. It's ridiculous that we don't. We have these old people around us who are wise and have been through so many things, and we should be bringing them in and teaching children and young people how to deal with difficult emotions, because emotions are difficult. But what you're doing, this stuffing down, which is what you do when you binge, you stuff down those feelings. They need a place to be. So instead of reflecting and thinking that this is all about when I was this age, it's no, this is how it is now. This is how it is for you now, in this moment, in this present moment. And it's about dealing with what's happening now in this present moment, because you won't always be binging. You'll be most of the time not binging, right? So that means that most of the time, when you're at work or when you're with your friends, you don't do it. The very fact that most of that time, you don't binge, you don't withhold, that's because most of the time you're allowing yourself to function. That's because you can make a choice not to do those behaviours. But you have to, when you get that frustration and that feeling and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go ahead and do it, you have to punctuate that. You have to give a full stop to it, and you have to be like, this is the bit that I avoid, and you have to bring it back and you have to sit with it. And it's scary and it's hard and it makes you sad, and you might cry and you might do all the things that you're trying to avoid, or you might write, or you might meditate, or you might put on cheesy trance music and just allow yourself to get carried away with it. Or you might just pick up the phone and say to somebody, I'm triggered, I'm going to eat, just please talk me down. all of those things create a shift in cognition and process. That's the advice I would give you. As I always say to you guys, there is lots of other people who would give different advice. I do not diminish theirs, and I'm sure they do not diminish mine, but that's from my particular understanding of what I think is the most helpful. And you can get fully well from an eating disorder. I really struggle with the idea that you can't, because I'm evidence of it, and lots of people I work with are evidence of it. You don't have to always see food as the enemy. Food is merely fuel. My rule is to teach people that if you want that chocolate bar, you can have it, or you could just have a bite of it, because it will only taste the same. So why would you have more? My help to get around the way that people see food is to teach people that it's all about what you're going to feed yourself, nourish yourself with. So there's nothing wrong with chocolate cake. There's nothing wrong with anything. But after the first spoonful, you're just repeating the exercise. So maybe just think about only having a few spoonfuls, and then you get to enjoy it without feeling that you're out of control with that, or without feeling guilty and all those things. So it's never about denial. It's always about feeling that food is something to be thrilled and enjoyed, but only in a way that serves purpose and is nutritious and nourishing for you. That's the way I believe things are. Incoming random question. Is that what somebody wrote? Incoming random question. I like that one. Where did Emma... Oh my God, this is when you're like, oh, Emma is very thrifty. Where did Emma purchase her office chair from? It's gorgeous. Kitting out my home office soon, so I thought I'd ask. Well, you see, I don't buy anything first hand. It's Italian, apparently, I'm told. I don't buy anything first hand. I buy everything second hand on Facebook Marketplace. It's second hand, Pete. Stop it. Pete's trying to go, it's brand new. It's not brand new. It's second hand. It was once brand new. You are right. I take that back. This chair was once brand new. I buy everything off Facebook Marketplace, so I can't say what it was. But basically, if you go on Facebook Marketplace, I promise you, like every chair in this room I got from it, it's amazing. So cheap. Like, I've got so many chairs because I just get a bit obsessed. I went through a whole period of just like every app. You know, the first lockdown, I became obsessed. I was like, I like velvet chairs. I like velvet chairs, and I like weird chairs. I don't like normal chairs. I like weird stuff. So Facebook Marketplace has got like loads of these little people who just want to get rid of stuff. I think there's a lot of rich people around who just want to redo their homes. Go on it. I promise you, you'll find one.
Coronation Street set. That's what we're on.
Oh, right, yeah. Also, the ones that I've got at the back of the room were from the Coronation Street set. But then they went into lockdown, so they had to sell it off the photographer. So I got them as well. Guys, I'm the most bargain basement person you'll ever meet. I hate spending money. It's just, look at me. I mean, do we have to ask, you know? Somebody once said to me when I was running for the train, it's a few years ago, hey, one day you'll be able to afford Burberry, like looking at this battered old suitcase. And I was like, even if I could afford Burberry, I would have a Burberry knockoff, because why would I pay the prices of Burberry? I'd rather go on holiday. Why do I have such little motivation to do anything? 1 minute. Then I come to life and do hours of things I need to do later on in the day. It makes me sad when I can't do what I want to get done. I think I may have BPD because of this. Oh, bless you. Honestly, poor motivation and then excessive motivation is honestly not a BPD thing where you have to think that's probably what's going on for me. I'm not saying you're not BPD. I can't tell you that. You need to go and see a psychiatrist. Hang on a minute. My mum used to say I drank like a navvy. Like a workman, she used to say. You're like a flipping workman, Emma. I don't know why I did it in that accent. My mum has got a really faux posh accent. When she answers the phone, she says, hello, Taunton 3541. That's the kind of thing that she does. But she always used to say I was like a workman. So thanks for that, Mum. She's a much better woman than me as far as the way she presents herself. So when it comes down to motivation, I think the last 16 months has been incredibly difficult for everybody regarding motivation. I think that motivation is the enemy of depression. It is. So we know that when we feel really depressed, we've got to kind of try and motivate ourselves to move through it. And that helps us to feel more stable emotionally, mentally, even physically because of the activity we do. But It's very easy to say it, isn't it? I think that lockdown, lethargy, the way that we felt about our environments, just the whole experience of feeling that we've not necessarily got the control that we normally have, it impacts on the way that we feel. And a lot of us have had problems with our prefrontal cortex because stress and anxiety affects that. That means that the area of your brain that usually is about higher consciousness and higher thinking and motivation and planning, that area of the brain has been impacted on. So first off, I'm not trying to say like there's nothing wrong, because clearly there is. You're feeling that. I'm saying try to be a bit compassionate to yourself. It's been really difficult. I am such a buzzy person. I have felt so flat that literally I think a steamroller could go over me and I wouldn't notice. That's how flat I felt compared to normal. And I think a lot of people, and certainly the people who I speak to on a regular basis, and certainly people who get in touch with me on social media, they're all reflecting that feeling. I think we can all feel that way. It's been bloody hard. I think that everybody is underestimating the trauma of the past 18 months. It has been highly traumatic. Whether you're somebody like me who's been labelled everything, I'm just like anti. I might just change my name to anti, because obviously everything to do with Emma Kenny becomes anti something. You know, for me that's quite traumatising because it's like not true, but also it's exhausting that you want to explain yourself to people, right? And it's the same when people are on the other side where they're like really scared of everything. It's exhausting. And then you've got all of the messaging that's gone on, and then you've got all of the division that's going forward, and you've got all of this real divisive experience, and trying to figure out what the world's like, and trying to wonder whether your job's going to be okay, and navigating relationships when you've been together 24/7, or all the things that go in between. You might have gone to university and it actually didn't happen, or like my kids gone to college and basically it never occurred because they've just not been in. All of these are highly traumatizing and people haven't recognized it. So when you feel knackered and your motivation isn't there, part of that is to do with that. But how can you manage motivation? So the reason I'm saying is because I know that I'm also giving myself a message and having this conversation with you. It often happens, doesn't it? For example, I've just been writing my closer column, and it's like how to have difficult conversations about how much your partner is drinking. And I'm writing it and I'm like, I need to have a word with myself. Do you know what I mean? There are moments, aren't they, where you get these messages and it's actually for you. So I'm kind of laughing because I had a really deep conversation with my brother who basically said, I am turning up at your house 3 times a week to make you exercise because you need to get back on that train, and also because he feels a bit like he needs to do the same. But part of it is scheduling. It genuinely is. So for me, it's 3 times a week at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? Although today it was in the afternoon because I said to him yesterday, I can't do an early morning on a Monday, but 3 times a week at 8 o'clock. So I want you to think about scrupulous scheduling. Scrupulous scheduling is effective for lots of different reasons. But first of all, if you have a plan and you work your plan, you get to see it and you can give yourself a pat on the back and it feels like you're constantly in a thriving experience. Secondly, people procrastinate. The average person, you'll love this, procrastinates for 297 hours a year. That's basically 14 days or more of being awake. So think about that. That's extra time you can give yourself by planning. Because when we procrastinate, we often make ourselves believe we're busy when we're not, or we try to avoid doing what we want to do, even though we know that it's actually going to bite us on the bum. So sit down and make a plan. And I mean social, physical, nutritional, all of it together. Just make a plan and then get yourself up at a certain position and time. Let me just tell you, the research that's come out recently, massive study, just under 100,000 people were studied, which is bloody huge. They found out that if you go to bed an hour earlier than normal and you wake up an hour earlier than normal, the reduction in depression is about 25%. That's a massive amount of people feeling less depressed. So arguably look at the routines that you've got. I'm going to say it, are you online too much? Because most of us are. I had a day the other day where I didn't have my phone in the day. I just had it in the morning and the evening. And I instantly felt like my day was 3 times as long. So also look at how you're interjecting screen time. And if you can digitally detox for a certain amount of hours a day whilst you plan, that will help procrastination dissolve and it will help you feel like you're prepping more. When it comes down to the idea that you're BPD, as I said, I can't tell you whether you are or not. I can't say whether there are any other traits that you feel reflect that. But if you seriously thought that that was an issue and you want to get that checked out, you need to speak to your GP and get that ball rolling. But being really lazy and then being like super energetic, that isn't necessarily anything to do with BPD. That can just be that, you know, you work more optimally at certain points in the day. And so I also suppose you want to ask yourself about your rhythm. So some people genuinely work really well in the early morning and some people are just really useless. And some people are excellent at working really late into the evening and some people fall asleep at 9 o'clock at night. So essentially look at your rhythm as well. The other thing I'd say is 2 hours white light. That's everyone. I didn't get mine today, but I know that that means that I won't sleep as well. So get 2 hours in the white light every single day. No excuses really right now. We should all be able to do that. That helps with your melatonin regulation. It also helps with the secretion of serotonin, which makes us feel good, and that will give you energy. Make sure you're exercising and check out your diet. Cut out the bloody processed food. If there's one thing I can say to all of you, if it's got more than one ingredient, you probably shouldn't be having it. That's the truth. Obviously, you can put your ingredients together. I don't just mean have a carrot for tea, although carrots are nice, particularly if they're braised. But, you know, look at what you're eating. Your body gives you what your body is given. So are you really looking after it? When it comes down to the alcohol consumption, because that's on my mind at the moment, if you're drinking and you're getting into a situation where you're having a bottle of wine a night, for example, with your partner, not that like I am or anything, you know, think about it, because that's not good. You know, we've certainly in our relationship been like, we've just got to cut alcohol out, because it's not that we drink heavily. It's just that there isn't really a reason to drink. Often you get into a habit. So look at those little things as well, because they make such a difference. When you start to just kind of be honest with yourself, like I'm honest with myself. It's annoying. I wish I could sometimes be more self-denying, but be honest with yourself and explore those themes as well. I've been traumatized. My brother used to beat me up and now I'm scared. My family allows this to happen and I'm still affected by this. Number one, that's domestic abuse, right? So you're online right now, that's domestic abuse. And if your family are allowing that to happen, it's not acceptable. So if you haven't been told that, then I'm telling you that now. And there are things that we can do to make you safe. So I don't know how old you are. If you're under 18, I can help make you safe. If you're over 18, I can help make you safe. But you have to be able to give me some details about that, because it's not okay. Your brother can't beat you up. That's completely illegal. And your parents are absolutely reprehensible for letting that happen. And I'm sorry if that sounds judgmental, but it's absolutely correct. It's not okay that somebody's doing that to you, my love. It's absolutely not okay. I would be scared too. It's a natural thing to be scared. Your experience in your family is not a safe experience. You are somebody who is meant to be in a house where people who are meant to protect you, i.e. your parents, protect you. If they are failing to do that, then there are things that we can do. I don't know how old you are, but I'm assuming that because you're talking about being in the house with your parents and your brother beating you up, that you're probably on the younger spectrum rather than the older spectrum. So if that's the case, there's lots of things that we can do. And I know that's scary. I've worked with so many young people and young adults who've been through these kind of situations, but they can be sorted out, but you can't do it by yourself, particularly if there is an acceptance level in the family that you're allowed to be abused this way. And it's abuse. And you don't just have to put up with it, my love. Because one of the things that you said about feeling traumatized by, of course you feel traumatized by it. Why wouldn't you feel traumatized by it? Because people who are meant to protect and look after you aren't doing that. You're being failed. You're not failing, you're being failed. I'm sorry you've had to put up with it for the amount of time that you've clearly had to put up with it. And it is scary when somebody's physically abusing you, but it doesn't have to carry on. There are things that can be done for you. So what I'd like to say to you is, if you want to message me, I think it came through on Instagram, and you need some help making you safe, we can do that. And it just comes down to you having that little bit. I know it's awkward and it's like, oh, I feel scared and I don't want to tell people about this, but it's so important because you matter. no one has a right to lay their hands on you. It doesn't matter what their excuses are. It's firstly illegal, secondly immoral, and most importantly, something that can be prevented. But you have to reach out. And I'm really glad you've asked me that question tonight. And I hope if you're listening to that, which I know you're online now, that it's sinking in and you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute, Emma's just taken that really seriously. That validates why I'm scared. And it also validates that there are options that can help me. And I can help you in that way. So please get in touch with me about that if you want me to do that. And I would really like to. Is there a link with OCD and eating disorders? I mean, what I would say is people with OCD, there is a common feature at times with them also having issues around the way that they eat. When we think about eating disorders, I suppose we can look at the huge spectrum. So I've worked with OCD clients who only eat in a certain way, of a certain plate, in a certain organised way of eating their food, yeah? But then it could be that you're talking about, well, I have OCD with anorexic features. And again, the way that you control what goes into your body. And when I say the word control, I don't want to jump on the bandwagon of, oh, anorexia is all about control or bulimia is all about control. I don't actually agree with that. I think it's multifaceted why people have got problems with food and eating. And I don't just think it's about control. I think it's a very easy hat to put on it, isn't it? Oh, it's all about control. And actually, I think that makes people feel really problematic when they don't feel it is about control. You know, we all have our subjective experience for developing these kind of disorders. What I'd say is that OCD, if you imagine what that is like, ritualistic thinking, ruminations, intrusive thoughts, actual physical rituals, these kind of habits lend itself in some degree to similar patterns with eating. Because eating is about withholding or overeating, so to speak. So you're kind of getting into situations where you can create these pattern behaviours, which of course are part of that cycle. So I would say, yes, there is definitely evidence to say that OCD and eating disorders can have comorbidities. It is true. But the most important thing to do is to be like, actually, it doesn't really matter whether OCD and my eating disorder are linked in any way. That isn't what I've got to think about. I've got to acknowledge that I'm dealing with these big issues and that I can heal from these issues, but that I definitely need to get some help. OCD UK is a bloody amazing resource, honestly. I love it. I go on OCD UK even though I don't have OCD because I like reading the blogs that they put up. I love the information that they put up, the resources. So I would strongly recommend that you go and have a look at OCD UK because that will be really helpful. But eating disorders are complex and without help, sometimes they can feel really overwhelming. So I would really recommend you go and see your GP. I really would. Just have that conversation because the OCD is one thing that they can explore. There are some treatments and eating disorders best served with help. So if you can get on a waiting list for therapy, it won't resolve everything immediately, but it will mean you're in a system where hopefully in the end you're going to get some support because it's a big thing to deal with. The other thing I suppose I would say is what kind of self-help behaviours can you create? Some people, it's about reading self-help books on this area. Honestly, the transmutation of knowledge into your understanding and action can be very, very helpful when you read books by people who've been through it and survived it, because it reminds you that firstly you can, and secondly there are often tips and tricks that people like me can't get across in this session, but that when you actually sit and read it again and again, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. So I'd also look at buying some books that can help you. And I know that you can download books, but I'm a bit of a bugger, me, for thinking that you need it physically. I think the psychological impact of having a book in your hands and reading it, I feel it's a commitment. I know that probably sounds a bit ridiculous, but it's the same when I write a journal as opposed to writing online. Like I like writing and I do type and I'm horrendously dyslexic, so my spelling's awful, which is great because I can write journals like literally no one in their right mind will ever be able to understand what I'm on about because it just looks like scribble, but I understand it and that's all that matters. Like somebody when I'm dead will be like, the memoirs, they won't because I'm like Z-list, but you know, the memoirs of Emma Kenny, and then they'll read them and be like, Emma just like scribbled in books and books and books. It's like 50 books of scribble, but I'll know what they meant as they set them alight. So yeah, write things down, get those kind of things out because the catharsis of that expression can help as well. So books, I always commit to, buy them, read them, reread them, and have that physical connection with them as well. I know you only asked whether there was a comorbidity there, but I thought I'm just going to go for it and give you the advice that I'd give you in case you are dealing with those kind of issues. Do you have any advice for treatment-resistant depression? Feel like the usual things only work temporarily and tried so many medications at a loss what to do. You know what? I think that the words treatment-resistant depression, it's so clinical. So you're treating yourself as either a success or a failure clinically. So we need to get rid of that. You're not treatment resistant, you just haven't found what works for you. It's really important. There are very few depressions that antidepressants treat. You know, we talk about this very little in society. It annoys the hell out of me because I see people like just harping on as though this is the cure. And then ultimately I see so many people who've had sertraline, fluoxetine, citalopram, they've tried every single one of them and none of them have worked for them, right? And they sit there thinking, what the hell is wrong with me? Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with you. The fact that we haven't told you that the vast majority of many depressions can't be treated with antidepressants. It's not as simple as that. So you're not treatment resistant. You're just not treatment focused that's working for you right now. And when you say the things that you've tried only happen to help temporarily, there's a few things that I'd suggest. So first off, even though you're going to have to wait and it'll take some time, unless you can afford it, don't get me wrong, if you can afford to be assessed by a private psychiatrist, I know it's expensive and believe me, I know money is tight. Although I was reading online the other day that apparently I'm £500,000 in debt, according to a troll. I'd like to know what I've done with that £500,000 for a start. I can tell you, God, no one would lend me that much. But the point is, when it comes down to depression, a lot of the things that we think we have tried, we haven't necessarily tried. So a private psychiatrist will cost quite a bit of money. It could cost up to £450, £500, okay? It's not cheap. If they're an NHS, obviously registered psychiatrist, you want them registered with the NHS for lots of reasons, but the best are NHS registered as well as private practice. If you could stretch to it, or if there's somebody nice in your family who'll loan you the money, if you had a proper assessment, and the reason I say that is psychiatrists, I know it's not like they look in your brain, but they have the diagnostic manual and they ask all of these questions that you'll never have been asked before. It's not like when you go into the doctors and you do a quick tick scale about whether you've been crying more or whether you've felt more helpless. You know what I mean? Like everyone can score badly on that on a bad day. Psychiatrists are absolutely brilliant at really understanding what's going on in your psyche by asking all these questions. They don't necessarily come across always as the friendliest people because their job is to essentially figure out what's going on. It's not about some empathetic experience. They are there to figure out what kind of issue you are presenting with, right? They use the manual to do that and they do it very diligently. And when you pay privately, you get not that you don't get a decent service on the NHS, but come on. They've got like minutes these days, haven't they? They're so under pressure. Mental health issues are so big that private psychiatrists obviously can give you more time than NHS ones. And you can get them to really diligently explore with you. The reason I say that is because sometimes people will have things like bipolar type 2. And bipolar type 2 often isn't picked up on the NHS because they're so busy and they're dealing with crisis and trauma all the time that they haven't got the time to really analyse it in that way. And yet when you sit with a private psychiatrist and they've given you 2 hours, they get to really analyse it. And then of course, if that's the case, you're not on the right medication. So it won't be that you're treatment resistant, it is that you'll be treatment wrong, simple as that. So that would be something that would be amazing. Then if you can't do that, then it comes down to self-management, doesn't it? And even though you're saying that things only work temporarily, one of the things that I know about a lot of my clients is what they say is it only works temporarily, but actually what they mean is I only worked it that way for a while. And the things that really are effective for them, they get exhausted and bored because they're depressed and then they don't keep going. So I want you to be really honest with yourself and say, well, what are those things that have worked in the past? And how can I really up the ante with those? So that might mean that you know that if you really do exercise, you do feel better. But actually when you're knackered and exhausted and depressed, you're like, I can't be arsed. That's when you have to exercise. You have to counter the feeling. When you're lying in bed and you don't want to get up because you feel like absolutely broken. And I know depression makes you feel like you just don't want to even confront the world. It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. But it's at that moment, it's like, I'm going to get up. And not only am I going to get up, I'm going to go for a 15-minute walk outside. Why? I'm going to change my state. And it's hard. And it's really hard, but you're going to do it. Also, what are you doing with your minerals, vitamins? What are you taking? Are you taking zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin B, vitamin C? Take all of them. I'm obviously plant-based, but if you eat meat or if you eat fish, lots of omega-3. You can get vegan omega-3 as well, but lots of it. Also, what purpose have you got? Sometimes when we're really depressed, it's because we're not living our authentic life. We're not living who we want to be. We have given up dreams, for example. The reason that we feel depressed isn't just because we are depressed, it's because we find our world depressing. And the fact that we've had such a shit 18 months means that that's probably added to that. But if you could just ask yourself the miracle question. So in solution-focused therapy, one of the things that we ask our clients is the miracle question. And whilst it might seem, when you first hear it, one of those things where you're like, why would I do that? I promise you it's so effective. And what the miracle question is you go to bed at night with all the way that you feel, all the things in your life that are going on, and you go to sleep, and in the night, a miracle happens. And everything that you needed to shift and change shifts and changes. But when you wake up, you didn't know the miracle occurred. How will you notice that it's happened? What will be the things that have shifted and changed? And the reason we ask that is as you start to figure out what the things would be that would have changed to make you feel differently, often you're finding your purpose and plotting and planning the things that progressively would make you happier. So ask yourself that question as well. It's something that I do regularly because, like any human being, I have horrible times and I have okay times. And arguably as well, when people say things like treatment-resistant depression, it makes me curl my toes up because you are not some kind of diagnosis. You are an individual human being with unique traits, abilities. You are a masterpiece of your own. Honestly, you might not feel that sometimes, but you are not a label. And of course, your depression can be healed. Of course it can. I would look for a spiritual sense as well. I genuinely believe that for me, spirit is everything. So I live my life every single day with a complete knowledge that in my most challenging of times, I find my faith. I'm not talking about people having to have a religious faith. I happen to have a strong faith in God, but other people have faith in energy, nature, humanity, charity. There are all these things you can have faith in, but find your spiritual purpose because it allows you to sink into it. So one of the things that I always do when I am really in pain is I pray. But it isn't that I follow a religion because I'm too logical and I'll just pick apart the things that are going on there. I like to just kind of go straight to the core and be like, that's just my relationship with the universal creator. But lots of people will, like I say, use charity or volunteering, or there is always a thing for faith. What is it about your purpose that you're denying? What would need to change in your world to make you feel more content? Also, again, always look at what you're putting in your body, what you're getting out of your body. I think a lot of us don't give ourselves the nutrition that we require. And it can be very cheap and affordable to revamp the way that our bodies are. It can be something as simple as just changing your diet. I don't know, try being vegan. I know that might sound like ridiculous to some of you, but if things aren't working, try playing around with what you put in your body. I have a big belief that if you look after your diet, it helps you to manage your mind. Like I always say to people, kefir is a great thing. If you drink milk, you can put it in milk and ferment it. Get the grains off Amazon, it's dead cheap, otherwise you'll pay a fortune. But you can put them in water, you can put them in oat milk, you can put them in soy milk. If you have kefir, it helps to balance the belly. The belly is the center of the self. It's where we feel everything. Come on, we all know that, don't we? We all know that when we're anxious and stressed or sad or depressed, boom, it's in the belly. The more we center the belly, the more we control the way that we feel. I would not have my life without kefir. It is transformative. Absolutely. So look at that as well. And again, the other thing is, I have a sneaking feeling that you're probably not allowing yourself to have the true vision of your purpose. And that maybe the depression is more that your life around you is not giving you what you need. So you're saying, I'm the problem. There's something intrinsically broken in me. Jesus, I can't even get these pills to work. But what if that's not it? What if you aren't the problem? What if you're reacting to a world that just does not work for you? And we need to shift the way that world is. That's a much more exciting way. It's not that you're treatment resistant, depressive. It's that you're resistant to a life that isn't fulfilling you. And that can be scary to admit, but it's also very freeing, liberating and exciting. And if there's one thing I've learned in the last couple of years, it's that often the hardest and most desperate of times create the greatest of growth and the most liberating of decisions. It's almost like it creates a fuck you mindset where it's like, I'm going to do it my way. And I want you to just think a little bit of that, reframe a little bit of that, and just see whether it kind of resonates with you. Hi Emma, could you explain more about cortisol fat? I love that question. You're like, bloody hell, I knew those diets weren't working. On a serious note, we call it the donut effect. So it's really important to note this. Women in particular, more than men, but men definitely get it. You know that kind of donut that we get around our belly and back? That's often the cortisol response. So that's to do with stress and the way that fat gathers. And it's a really important message to us because basically, as much as you'll be like, I just want to look better in these skinny jeans, that's not the thing to think about. This is more about, okay, hang on. This is my body gathering this area of fat because I'm really stressed. And that's giving you a really clear message about what you need to do, which is to absolutely think about creating some stress release in your life, whether that's reflexology, aromatherapy, acupuncture, whether that's joining a Pilates or a yoga class. You know, it's not about going around and kind of doing lots of HIIT training. I think that people often think that if they've got fat around the belly, it's all about you just need to move more, but often it's that you need to stress less. So we all know the fundamentals of a healthy body. It's what you put in and it's what you do with, right? Of course. So if you eat a healthy diet and you exercise or are active, then your body's going to be lean. You cannot out-exercise a bad diet. You can't. Anybody who tells you otherwise is lying. If your diet is bad, then you will not be able to use exercise to get rid of fat because your body just won't work that way. So first off, look at what you're putting in your body because stress and food and diet is all related. Secondly, if you've got that big donut, and a lot of people, I used to say, my best friend, she's not with me anymore, but my best friend, when she was alive, she used to call herself a potato on sticks because she had skinny legs and skinny arms, but she had quite a big belly. And that was because she'd had such a horrible, horrible 5 years when her husband had died and all the things that went with it. And that joke aside was her acknowledging that the stress had built that way, the way that she body was. You know, she drank a bit too much. Yes, she ate a little bit too much sometimes, but it was very much that cortisol belly. So I'd look that up. And the main thing is to think about, okay, now I know that it's partly to do with stress, and for men it gathers around the heart. So again, that can be really problematic. It's about how do I institute relaxation? So as opposed to me saying, go and do a 25-mile run, it's like actually what we need to do with you is we need to soothe you. We need to get you back in check with your body. We need to displace some of that stress, and we need to institute things that are going to make you feel fundamentally more relaxed because that's giving you a message. It's not because you're lazy or greedy. It's because you're fundamentally eating probably a little bit too much, maybe drinking a little bit too much, but actually it's direction of the stress. So you're managing your emotions in a way that are kind of showing on your body, if that makes sense. Oh, any advice on skin picking? Stopped smoking and started picking again. First off, bloody well done for stopping smoking. Brilliant. Because skin picking is really annoying. It really is. But smoking definitely has the potential to kill you. So you've done a really good thing there. However, you're getting that horrible habit with the hands, aren't you? It's like when I was younger, like smoking was great, wasn't it? Because you were like, I can express myself however I want. Like, I'm angry, I'm chilled, I'm sexy. You know how it was just growing up in the 80s. is the way that we used to use cigarettes. So you kind of get used to all these behaviours that coexist with smoking. And then when you give it up, there is an adjustment period where you're like, how do I express myself and what do I do with my hands? And you're just doing that habit, which is kind of picking your skin. But you don't want the consequences of your success showing on your body, do you? You don't want the consequences of your success becoming a picking problem. Calm harm is really good because picking is a form. I know that you're not saying that you're a severe harmer, by the way, but nonetheless, Calm Harm is a really good app and it helps you to think about how to interject with that kind of unconscious picking. There are other things that you can do, such as wear gloves. I know that you probably don't fancy that in the summer, but wearing gloves just helps because it creates a blocker. Some people will also put oil on their face. So it might be that you get a really nice serum that's an oily one, not one that sinks in, that one that stays on the surface. Although with respect, you could use olive oil. Olive oil's fine for the skin. Anything that disrupts the way that you're picking. So it makes it difficult, say impossible, which is what we really want. So that would be helpful. Also, some people will say things, again, I think the app's a really good idea. I also think the oil's a really good idea, but some people will say wear elastic bands and just pick the elastic bands. But my thing is I like to displace the behaviour entirely. Don't get me wrong, the elastic bands have been shown to work effectively. People don't harm because they're kind of using those. Another person will suggest things like ice, holding ice, because again, it gives you something to do with your hands. I like to change the behaviour pattern. So if I can kind of break the cognition, which is like that unconscious soothing that you do when you're picking, it's an unconscious soothing to some degree, isn't it? You're not purposely going out of the way to damage your skin. You're almost kind of going into a bit of a zone, and the zone is what makes you perpetuate that behaviour. So as you start to get into that kind of zone, my thing would be to break the behaviour. That might be using an app, it might be writing something down, it might be acknowledging, oh, hang on, I'm going to go into that mode, right, get the gloves on. Those are kind of ways of breaking the cognitions. But don't underestimate how brilliant you've done. It's hard to change a habit like smoking. It's an addiction and you've broken that cycle. But let's not sabotage that further now by creating a situation where you're damaging your skin. And also just be aware of that little naughty unconscious. The naughty unconscious that's like, I want a fag. And you're like, I don't want a cigarette. I don't smoke anymore. And they're like, I'm going to pick your skin then until you have a fag. Can you see how that subconscious can do it? Almost like well, if I'm picking my skin and causing this damage, maybe I should just smoke again. If it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That self-saboteur within when we really want to do something that we know we're not going to do. And so we create a habit that almost contradicts the success and then reminds us as why we should go back to the habit that we've given up. So just be aware of that little self-sabotage mechanism. But those are the things that I do without a doubt. How do you deal with coming to terms with health problems and knowing how debilitating it's going to be? So first off, I'm really sorry that you've got health problems that are going to be a long-term issue. And I don't know what those health problems are. So I'm hoping that they're health problems that mean that you're going to have a long life, but that you're going to potentially have to modify the way that you live. So mindset is everything. And the reason that I say that is because I sometimes feel like we are told certain things about ourselves and then that becomes our truth. If I had listened to my doctor 4 years ago when he told me that I have a vertebrae that's squashed and he said I was never going to get any better, I was in really bad pain as well, and that the only thing they could do is give me opiates and that was it for life. And I actually said to him during the phone call, well, I'll book myself into Dignitas now. And whilst I was having a bit of a giggle with him, I absolutely was like, I can't live my life always in pain. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, do I make this my truth? Or do I explore the fact that I have control over my body to a degree? And so I ignored all the advice. I went online. I looked at people who were in similar situations who were doing it differently. I looked at stretching exercises. I looked at plank exercises, I looked at stability exercises, and I did it. Now my back isn't perfect, I'll always have pain, but compared to what it was those years ago, it is incomparable. I did not allow that to become my truth. So the first thing I'd say to you is, whatever your fears are about that, they've not been realised yet, so try not to buy into the future focus. Things evolve and shift and change constantly. Secondly, where's your support? Where's your tribe? Who else is suffering from similar things? Because I tell you what, those forums are like gold, because there'll be somebody in there who's doing it a different way. And there'll be someone in there who's got a little nugget of advice that you wouldn't even have thought about, or might be taking a supplement, or might be doing something completely unique, or might be on a clinical trial that's changing their life. So don't feel that you have this bleak existence in the future. I think that that's one of the most important shifts to make. Secondly, how can you take control of your life now? How can you make your body the best it can possibly be? You might have health problems. They might be there for the rest of your life. I've got a really good friend who has MS. It's always going to be there. But man, she has changed and transitioned the way that her body is because she knew that that was going to be the case. I've got another friend who was severe ME, wheelchair ME. She's now a yoga instructor. She's made a fortune being one whilst also maintaining her health. So your truth and what you're told your truth is are separate entities. So try not to feel that bleakness and instead be like, okay, what can I do? What power have I got? How are other people doing it? Where are the success stories? Because there will be them. When I go online, where are the success stories about my condition? And look for them. Don't look at the masses of negativity. So often people do that. Look for the chinks of light because they're always there. There are always stories where people did it differently and people had a different perspective and viewpoint, and that's where I'd go because those are where you get guided in a direction that I won't be able to give you because you don't tell me what your condition is and I'm not an expert in that way. But certainly look online for that. I think so much is so good about the online community. I was talking to somebody today and she was like, I'm never going to go on the phone again. After all this is over, after all this changes and all these things that are going on, I'm never ever going to go on the phone again. She was like, I hate smartphones. They're all about tracking. They're all about control and all of that stuff. And I said, you know what? I get that part of it. But for me, the online world is just incredible. It connects people from everywhere, from every inch of the globe. And I know that there's really bad stuff on the web. Bloody hell, 5% of the web is Google, 95% of the web is the dark web and the deep dark web. I get it. You can do some horrible things. People get trafficked online. People buy guns and drugs. I get it. But that isn't my world, is it? And that isn't your world. We are in a different world where we're about connecting and caring and recognizing that we can all together serve a higher purpose, serve a better purpose. And for me, the online world is somewhere full of hope. You just have to look for it, if that makes sense. And then, yeah, you get your trolls and your idiots and people who just go out of their way to be nasty because they're a bit damaged or sad. But for the most part, it's full of like-minded humans who, if you seek each other, you'll find them. So just try to find your tribe and look for those people who did it differently. I always think that. Everybody in my family says that I am that person. I don't accept no. I've never accepted no in my life. I will never accept no. A no is just another response away from a yes. I will always get my yes. And I've never failed to, because I never stop until I get it. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean that I don't get hurt. It doesn't mean that I don't fail. I constantly do. But it means that I always get what I want because there's always a yes. Simple as that. So find the alternative. I've always lived my life with that belief system. I don't need to fight a system. I don't need to agree with a system. I can just create an alternative system. And anybody can do that with their health, their wellness, their perception, all of it. And that does not mean that I, like everybody else, do not have moments of great crisis. I am the queen of great crisis occasionally. I really am. I should have a crown. I will have like a breakdown in a week of like 2 days, and then I'll be like, oh, that was a spiritual awakening. But I'm human like all of you. It's hard right now. It's tough out there. At the end of the day, there has been a lot of destruction, and now it's requiring healing. And there's a hell of a lot of distance to travel. And the thing about the chaos, I keep saying this every time you come, chaos is always about growth. And this chaos that feels so existentially scary and magnificently bizarre in so many ways is actually a pattern that will make sense in the end. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that we're all going to agree, but it does mean that in the end it will make sense. And it's just having faith in that. And to all of you out there who are like struggling with the way that the world feels, I kind of sit sometimes and I'm like, you know what? When you go outside, you just kind of take a step back and look at nature and the way that the wind blows through the trees and the way that the birds fly. And they're not involved in any of this chaos that we're feeling. And it's good to acknowledge that for a moment. It's like, actually, everything's perception based, right? Because that bird in that tree really couldn't give a crap about vaccine passports. It's just going to fly, you know? That's the way nature is. And maybe the less hung up we get on these extraneous details and the more that we acknowledge what we are about is human relations and connections, and the more that we concentrate on the human connections and relations, the less that feeling of control or fear or worry, the less that dominates our consciousness. Because the thing about your brain is no one can ever control you. It's limitless. Every single unique human being, limitless. Your imagination, your creativity, all of it. No one gets to control that, no matter what they bring in or do. And that's a really life-enhancing experience, I think, when we just take a moment to see that. Right, I shall see you again soon. Join me for my crime on Wednesday. That always sounds, when I say things like, join me for crime on a Wednesday, I'll be twocking in the local area. You know, I mean my YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me, by the way, when you do. I love it. All the chat that comes on is really good fun. It's a really supportive community. I appreciate you very, 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 very much. It's also when I'm talking about doing my crime tour and I'm like, I'm hoping to do my crime tour in September. And I just think really it does sound like I'm just going around robbing banks, doesn't it? That's where the £500,000 debts come from. No, that was not right, is it? I'd be 500,000 in the black, wouldn't I? Not the red. That's why I'm terrible at maths. All right, guys, see you soon. Take care.